So in this video, we're going to be looking specifically at polynomial inequalities. So these are the steps that are out of your notes, but I wanted to have them in the video. Anytime you see an inequality sign, you'll see them down at the bottom of the screen. Anytime you see an inequality, you're going to use a sign chart. So there are your steps for the sign chart. We're going to go through an example, but this is, again, anytime you see greater than, less than, greater than, equal to, less than, or equal to. You do the same process. The only thing that's different is you pick different intervals. So here's our first example. The inequality says x times x plus 2 times x minus 1 is less than or equal to 0. So as soon as I see that inequality symbol, that tells me I'm doing the sign chart. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to find the values that when I set one side equal to 0, the numbers you get out. Some of the questions in Hawks will ask you for two parts. It'll say step 1, find the values when you set one side equal to 0, and then step 2, find the intervals. So make sure you're aware of which one they're asking for. So this one just says find the intervals. So I'm doing both parts built in. So I'm going to take the left side and set that thing equal to 0. So I have x times x plus 2 times x minus 1 equals 0. This is going to give me what we're going to refer to as my critical values. So I set each piece equal to 0, and I get x equals 0, x equals negative 2, and x equals 1. So those are my values. Now for the sign chart, that's what I'm going to use to divide up my number line. So I have my number line. It does matter what order you write them in. They have to go in least to greatest because I'm putting them on an actual number line. So negative 2 is going to come first, and then 0, and then 1. So those are going to be my three values, and again, that came from setting the equation equal to 0. Now within each interval, each piece of the number line where I've broken it up, I need to find a test value. So negative 3 would be a good test value for that region, because this thing is going off to negative infinity. The next one, negative 2 to 0, a good test region in that, or a test value in that would be negative 1. And then the next one from 0 to 1, I would pick 1/2. You have to pick a fraction, so 1/2 right in the middle. And then from 1 off to infinity, I would go ahead and pick 2. So now what I'm going to do with each interval is I'm going to plug in the test value into the actual equation and see what I get out. See what the sign is. Now again, all I care about is positive or negative. It's a sign chart. I don't necessarily care about the value. So I'm taking and I'm plugging in to the expression. So I have x plus 2, and x minus 1. Now I'm plugging in not x, but my test value. I'm plugging in negative 3. So everywhere where there was an x, I'm going to replace it with a negative 3. So negative 3, the sign that comes out is going to be negative. Negative 3 plus 2, the sign that comes out is going to be negative. It's negative 1, but I only care about the sign. Negative 3 minus 1, I get a negative sign. Okay, so now I'm going to take and multiply all those together. Negative times negative times negative. Two of those negatives are going to cancel and leave me with negative. Okay, so in that region, the sign that comes out is going to always be a negative number. I don't care what it is, I just care that it's negative. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with negative 1. So I'm going to plug in negative 1 everywhere I saw an x. So the first one is negative 1, and then I have negative 1 plus 2, and then I have negative 1 minus 1. So I need my signs coming out. Well, that's negative. Negative 1 plus 2 gives me positive. Negative 1 minus 1 gives me negative 2. So negative. So a negative times a positive times a negative is going to give me a positive. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the next region. Plug in 1/2. So I have 1/2, I have 1/2 plus 2. I have 1/2 minus 1. So 1/2 is coming out positive. 1/2 plus 2 is coming out positive. 1/2 minus 1 is going to come out negative. So I have positive times negative is going to give me a negative overall. And then the last region, I'm going to plug in 2. So 2, and then I have 2 plus 2, and then I have 2 minus 1. So that coming out as positive. 2 plus 2, positive. 2 minus 1, positive. Positive times positive is going to give me a positive. So up until there, the sign chart is always the same. The different part is which values do I actually want. So mine said less than or equal to 0. As soon as you see the or equal to 0, that tells you it's brackets. The less than part tells me that you are picking this negative areas. Because it's less than, I want the regions that are negative. I want what's below the x-axis. So I'm going to put a bracket here and going to put brackets here. Now I need to write that in interval notation. The key that you have got to remember is that you are using these values up here. You are not using the test values. The test values just told you the sign. The actual intervals go from the critical values. These values that I got when I set the left side equal to 0. So this first region, this thing right here comes over here from negative infinity up to negative 2. So I'm going to have my first region will be negative infinity to negative 2, bracket, union, because I'm jumping over that positive region, 0 to 1, bracket. So that is your final answer.